What's up, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. My main topic is going to be the state of the Packers wide receiver position. Specifically, do they have enough weapons? Do they need to add more talent? They go out and get 3 rookies in this draft and specifically target that position pretty heavily. This is all, of course, in regards to Davante Adams getting traded to the Raiders. So I wanted to break down this position a little bit greater detail and see, does Green Bay have the weapons that they need? But before we get there, interestingly enough, as I'm researching this topic, I'm looking up and down the Packers roster and who they have. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anyone. And I'm going down and I have Rico Gafford listed on my list, and I'm looking at the Packers roster and there's no Rico Gafford there. Now, you might be thinking, Andy, who the heck is Rico Gafford? And I don't expect everyone to know who Rico Gafford is, but he was a wide receiver that the Packers picked up this offseason as a street free agent who has spent some time at wide receiver in, I think he was with the Raiders and a couple other teams. But most importantly, super speedy wide receiver, 4.22 40, has the ability to stretch the field a little bit. Well, I'm looking again up and down and I'm like, there's no Rico Gafford here. So I'm looking and researching, like, did they release him? And I totally missed it. And I didn't see anything. So finally I search his name on the roster and he is at cornerback. So he's listed at corner on the Packers roster wearing Sam Shields' old number 37, appropriately enough. Shields made the transition from wide receiver to corner. Now, it should be noted that Gafford played corner in college, and when he started in the league as an undrafted free agent, he was initially a corner. Even the Raiders, who transitioned him to wide receiver, still played him at corner / wide receiver and were sort of cross-training him. So this is not a totally new position for Gafford. He has played corner in the past. Again, blazing fast football player, 4.22 40 speed, so incredibly quick, but as a corner, definitely undersized at 5'9" and 184 pounds. So again, just noteworthy there that Gafford is in the corner room for Green Bay, not at wide receiver. So if anyone was thinking or hoping that maybe Gafford was the answer to the Packers' speed problem at wide receiver, that question is answered. He is not the answer, and he is now at corner for Green Bay. So we will see what comes of that. He seems like somebody who may be a prime practice squad candidate as he sort of retransitions back to the corner position. But on to our main topic, and that's who Green Bay has on the roster at wide receiver, the state of the position, no Davante Adams, and I guess the bigger question, right, is do they need to add more talent in that room? So I think before we look at that second part, we have to look at who Green Bay currently has on the roster at wide receiver. And it's a really interesting group, right? Because I think it's very clear that Green Bay does not have a clear-cut number 1 wide receiver, but they also have about 6 to 7 players at least who are 53-man roster caliber wide receivers. Now, that might be as a 4 or a 5, and I think you can make an argument that they actually have more than that, but I think you can make an argument that, again, that Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard, Sammy Watkins, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Samori Toure, Amari Rodgers, and maybe even Malik Taylor, maybe even Juwan Winfrey, like 8 or 9 of those guys could be true 53-man roster players. Now, again, Winfrey, Malik Taylor, maybe even Toure, we could be talking more as like a number 6 wide receiver on a team, but they have probably 8 guys and at least 6 to 7 that are worthy of 53-man roster spots. So it's not like Green Bay is in this position where they've got like, a number 1, number 2, and number 3, and then just have a bunch of guys who are not eligible to be like 53-man roster guys, right? It's not like they're completely lacking in depth. They have pretty decent depth at the position. They're just lacking in top end talent, and really, most importantly, lacking a true number 1 wide receiver. Now, just looking at Pro Football Focus's grades on the top 118, I think they had graded wide receivers this past season, which is basically, if you think of about 3 wide receivers per team, which would be sort of your starters. Randall Cobb graded as the 52nd best wide receiver, which would be a low-end number 2 wide receiver. Sammy Watkins was listed as number 68, which would be a high-end number 3. And Allen Lazard was at 80, which is about a mid-range number 3 wide receiver, right? So given those rankings, based on, again, last year's Pro Football Focus stats, you would say that Green Bay had a number 2, like a low-end number 2, a top-end number 3, and a like a middle-tiered number 3 wide receiver. So again, Cobb, Lazard, and Sammy Watkins being those 3 wide receivers. Now, again, there's a lot that goes into this, right? So you have to figure the fact that with Cobb and Lazard specifically, those two players were playing behind MVS and Devontae Adams with more snaps, more opportunities. They could see an increase clearly in playing time, but in opportunities and maybe even play better in those situations as well. Sammy Watkins is joining a new team. And then, as we mentioned, Green Bay attacks the draft aggressively with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Samori Toure. Amari Rogers is in a second year, hopefully making a second year jump. You've got Malik Taylor, Juwan Winfrey, Danny Davis is an undrafted free agent. So again, you've got some interesting question marks here as to how you would slot these wide receivers moving forward. But I think you could sort of look at it as Randall Cobb at this point of his career is probably an average level slot wide receiver in the NFL. I think Lazard and Watkins in a perfect situation could profile as a number 2 wide receiver if you had a strong number 1 wide receiver, right? Like a Devontae Adams. If you've got Devontae as a 1 and Cobb as your slot, you don't really mind a guy like Sammy Watkins or Allen Lazard as your number 2. But if you don't have that clear-cut number 1, those two as your top number 2 becomes a bit more of a question mark, right? And clearly, if you don't have a number 1, now neither of them are number 2. Like one of them has to be a number 1 potentially, right? And then you've got 3 rookies who have a lot of potential. Clearly, Christian Watson, the top of the list of potential, but Dobbs has potential. So does Samori Toure, in my opinion. Again, Amari Rogers, who's looking to take a jump and hopefully become more of a player at the slot position and challenge Randall Cobb for some of that playing time. And then again, we just don't know quite yet what we have fully, or the Packers have fully, in Malik Taylor, Juwan Winfrey, and Danny Davis, who will all have opportunities as well. So how I would sort of slot that is, as of right now, I think Allen Lazard is probably your 1. Sammy Watkins is probably your 2. Randall Cobb is your slot. And then Christian Watson is probably your deep threat / gadget wide receiver. And then Dobbs is probably your 5. Amari is probably your 6. And then you've got some question marks as to how you want to slot players after that. But you don't have a clear number 1. I don't even know that you necessarily have a clear number 2. So on the surface, I think you can make a very strong argument that no, Green Bay does not have the top end wide receiver, the playmaker, or the depth chart overall at wide receiver that you would like to see for this to be a top competing team. And it's the low hanging fruit for all national media, right? The Packers need a wide receiver. The Packers don't have that true number 1. They traded away Devontae. Even before Devontae and MVS left, people were saying Green Bay needed more wide receivers. Now MVS and Devontae are gone. And again, they attacked it aggressively with 3 rookies, an undrafted free agent, as well as Sammy Watkins. So it's not like they did nothing, but I think there's still some clear question marks there. That being said, this is not so much right now for Green Bay about a clear number 1, number 2, and number 3, right? This is a wide receiver by committee approach. This is different players who bring different skill sets to the Green Bay Packers, and it's going to be up to Aaron Rodgers and really Matt LaFleur to unlock those players and open up their skills so that they are functionally, or like they can function within Green Bay's offense, right? I think you have 2 clear-cut possession wide receivers in Sammy Watkins and Allen Lazard. Those are 2 players who are big, physical wide receivers. Watkins has a bit more speed, but both of them can threaten downfield a little bit, more as a contested catch sort of wide receiver, but they both can go over the middle. They both can be that guy that you trust a little bit in the red zone. Like, they are your sort of true general possession wide receivers. Neither of them are going to be game breakers. Neither of them are going to be game changers. Like, both of them could have a game here or there that's like 7 catches for 140 yards and a touchdown or something like that. Like, if either of them had a game like that, you wouldn't be like, wow, I can't believe that just happened. But it's just not going to be consistently like a Devontae Adams was, right? So, but those clearly are your 2 possession wide receivers. I think you also have 2 speed wide receivers, right? Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. I think both of those players have the ability to threaten down the field, and Green Bay will utilize those 2 players to be, even if it's a decoy on the outside, but potentially stretch the field and open things up underneath a little bit more. Then you have 3 slot wide receivers, in my opinion, in Randall Cobb and then Amari Rogers and Samori Toure, who can, hopefully win in the slot. Now, Allen Lazard can win in the slot as well. So you have sort of that position covered. And then, Christian Watson can be used as a gadget guy. Amari can be used as a gadget guy. Cobb can be used a little bit as a gadget guy still. So you've got some flexibility there as well. So it's more about utilizing these wide receivers and their skill sets to what they do best and putting them in positions to succeed. Again, a wide receiver by committee approach. And I fully believe that Green Bay and Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst probably like this wide receiver room a little bit more than the national media or many people would lead you to believe. And again, I think that the onus is going to be on Aaron Rodgers to be the MVP quarterback and to throw some of these wide receivers open and set them up for success. But maybe more importantly, for Matt LaFleur to set them up for success. And we've seen Matt LaFleur do this on a variety of different occasions. And while I know a lot of people are calling for, right now, well, we just saw Jarvis Landry get signed, right? So Jarvis Landry goes to the Saints. So now those top wide receivers are dwindling down that are still on the market. Basically, it's Julio Jones, who again has been banged up the last few years. And then you've got OBJ, who, is coming off of injury and you're not sure when he's going to be totally healthy. Maybe you could throw a Will Fuller in there, who's, probably not the same player at this point. But those are, three of the wide receivers that are left. I think you could make an argument outside of maybe Beckham. Julio's probably not a clear number one, at least that you can count on week in and week out anymore. OBJ coming off of injury probably may or may not be a true number one. Fuller certainly is not. So some of that question is there, but I know that there's people that, are questioning, will Green Bay go make a run for one of those players? And I think the answer right now is going to be no. And while it wouldn't shock me if Green Bay did make a move like that, I just think it makes sense with the players that they have on the roster to test them out during training camp and to see, there's a lot of question marks, right? What can Sammy Watkins do in a new offense with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback? What can Allen Lazard do if he's given the opportunity to be a true number one wide receiver? He's answered the bell with literally everything they've asked him to do in his entire career so far. If they ask him to be the guy, does he take another step with that opportunity? Sometimes opportunity drives success. And that could be the case with Lazard. I don't think it's going to be, but you just don't know. What do you get out of your three rookie wide receivers and Toure and Dobbs and Watson? And, we've seen crazier things than a wide receiver come in as a rookie and have, a really nice season and potentially even be the guy in your offense. So that's not without the realm of possibility. And then, does Amari Rodgers take a jump? And would it even be that crazy if Green Bay liked Malik Taylor a lot more than maybe we know? We've seen wide receivers over the course of, the last 30 years with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers that we weren't necessarily expecting to have a major role in the offense, that all of a sudden have a major role in the offense before we know it. And it's not just wide receivers, it's all throughout different positions. Malik Taylor is somebody that they've sort of been grooming the last couple seasons who, very... how do I want to put this? Memorably made the roster over Jake Kumro, right? Like they've liked him as a wide receiver. Clearly special teams was a huge part of that, but they've sort of been grooming him. So maybe they like him more as well as an option within this offense. Tough to say, but I have a feeling that Green Bay likes this wide receiver room more than maybe, again, the national media and others would lead you to believe. And as I mentioned earlier, I think they have 7 or 8 guys that are capable of making a NFL 53-man roster. So again, it's not like they need another guy just for the sake of getting a guy. Yes, this team probably needs a true playmaker as a number one wide receiver. They are probably, in my opinion, clearly lacking that player. But again, I'm not sure that there's a perfect scenario out there where they can just go out and find that player. So I think it's much more likely that they let these players compete via training camp. And then maybe at the end of camp, if they're just like, all right, we're not there, we need somebody else, maybe they explore options at that point. Or maybe more likely, they even go into the season with this group and see how they perform. And then again, if it's not up to par, they look at the trade deadline to see if they can acquire a wide receiver at that time or in season. And while it's not exactly a super popular thing in the NFL to make trade deadline deals and go out and acquire a ton of players, that's not something that just happens a ton. The one position where this does happen quite a bit is wide receiver. In fact, if you go and look at all of the in-season deals, here are just a few of the names that were traded at wide receiver. Jakeem Grant, Mohamed Sanu, and I'm kind of going in order here, which is why I'm starting with Jakeem Grant, but Jakeem Grant, Mohamed Sanu, Emmanuel Sanders, Amari Cooper, Randy Moss, Deion Branch, Braylon Edwards, Kelvin Benjamin, Roy Williams, Chris Chambers, Jerry Rice, Keenan McCardle, Antonio Bryant. There have been some fairly significant wide receivers that have been traded in season or at the deadline throughout the last couple decades. And again, for a league that we don't see very many in-season trades with, and we're seeing more, right? Von Miller, Jalen Ramsey, we've seen a little bit more of it, Zach Ertz, as of late. But wide receiver's always been a position that there have been players that have been traded. And I suppose that list could also be a little bit of a buyer beware because a lot of those situations did not turn out well for the team that acquired those players. But it is a position that teams have attacked in season before. So if Green Bay gets in the season, they realize, hey, like we just don't have the guys that are cutting it. We need another guy. That is something they could look for. And even last year, OBJ gets released mid-season, and there was the opportunity there. Will Fuller, a couple seasons ago, was a player who almost got so there's just a lot of different opportunities usually to attack that wide receiver position in season. And I think Green Bay may look that route and say, we're going to give our guys the chance first. They're going to compete in training camp, and we're going to go out. And if we don't feel like our wide receivers are playing up to the level that we need it, we'll explore either at the trade deadline or before adding another player at that time. And again, you never know when or how a wide receiver may come available, which again goes back to Odell Beckham just a season ago. The other thing I want to point out here, and this has been a very big talking point over the last few seasons. And I know we've heard this stat before, right? The Packers are 7-0 without Davante Adams. And I want to be clear to start off. I don't think the Packers are a better team without Davante Adams. I don't think that, all of a sudden they've solved the Rubik's Cube, right? Of all right, we got rid of Davante. We are now ready to go win a Super Bowl. I don't think that is the case. But it is worth pointing out that Green Bay did go 7-0 and that Rodgers has had success. It's not like you're looking at these numbers and being like, all right, they won these games, but they were very defense driven. Here were the numbers, right? So Aaron Rodgers, 22 of 37, 184 yards, which was low in the Cardinals game last year, but 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. They won that game 24-21. Against the Saints 2 years ago, 21 of 32, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Packers won 37-30. Against the Falcons, Rodgers was 27 of 33, 327 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Packers won 30-16. Against the Cowboys, Rodgers was 22 of 34, 215, no touchdowns, no picks. Packers won 34-24. Against the Lions, Rodgers was 24 of 39, 277, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Packers won 23-22. Against the Raiders, Rodgers was 25 of 31, 421 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Packers won 42-24. And against the Chiefs, Rodgers was 23 of 33, 305 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Packers won 31-24. So 5 of those 7 games, they put up 30 plus points. They won. They were 7-0 in those 7 games, and they averaged 31.5 points per game. And again, want to be very abundantly clear. I don't think that means they are better without Davante Adams. Want to say it again and again and again. I don't believe that's the case, but it's also very clear that Green Bay found ways to win. They found ways to put up points. They found ways to have a clear and steady passing attack. Rodgers was very successful. His numbers in those 7 games, 164 for out of 239, 68.6% completion percentage, 2,012 yards, 19 touchdowns, 1 pick. On a per game basis, that's 23 of 34 for 287 yards, basically 3 touchdowns, no picks, 2.7 touchdowns, 0.1 picks, but basically 3 touchdowns, no picks. So 23 of 34, 287, 3 touchdowns, no picks. That's the average numbers for Aaron Rodgers in the last 7 games under Matt LaFleur with no Davante Adams. And I think the bigger question here, right, is, all right, so how did they do that? Well, there were 2 ways. Either A, they spread the ball around a lot, or B, they utilized their running backs a lot more in the passing game, or in some cases, both. So let's look at the numbers for the receiving numbers for these games. Let's go Cardinals last year, right? Aaron Jones, 7 receptions, led the way, 7 for 51. But look at all the different names that they spread it around here too. Aaron Jones, 7 catches, Tonyan with 3, Winfrey with 4, DeGuara with 2, Cobb with 3, EQ with 2, Amari Rodgers with 1. So 7 different receivers caught a total of 22 balls, with Aaron Jones leading the way with 7 catches for 51 yards. All right. Saints, a couple years back. Allen Lazard had a really nice game in that game, 6 catches, 146 yards and a touchdown. But again, spreading the ball around. Lazard had 6 catches. Tonyan had 5 catches. Sternberger, 3 catches. Lewis with a catch. Aaron Jones, 2 catches. Tyler Ervin, 2 catches. MVS with a catch. Jamal Williams with a catch. So again, spreading the ball around. Against the Falcons 2 years ago, Tonyan 6 catches, Jamal Williams 8 catches, MVS 4 catches, Aaron Jones 5, Shepard with 2, Malik Taylor with 1, Tyler Ervin with 1. And in this case, again, Jamal Williams with 8, Aaron Jones with 5, Tyler Ervin with 1. So 14 of the 27 catches went to running backs in that game. All right, Cowboys a couple years back. Jones, 7 catches, 75 yards. But then Jimmy Graham had 3. Geronimo Allison had 2. Tonyan 1. MVS 1. Trey Carson 4. Mercedes Lewis 2. Danny Vitale 1. Jake Kummerow 1. Spreading the ball around. Against the Lions, Allen Lazard 4. Mercedes Lewis 2. MVS 2. Geronimo Allison 3. Jamal Williams 4. Jimmy Graham 2. Jake Kummerow 2. Aaron Jones 4. Darius Shepard 1. Spreading the ball around. Against the Raiders, MVS 2, Jimmy Graham 4, Kummerow 2, Vitale 2, Lazard 3, Jones 4, Allison 4, Jamal Williams 4. That is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players with at least 2 catches in that game. And 5 catches, 5 players with at least 3 catches in that game against the Raiders. And then against the Chiefs, that was the big Aaron Jones game, right? So attacking the running backs in the passing game, 7 catches, 159, and 2 touchdowns for Jones in that game. But once again, Jake Kummerow, 2 catches, Lazard, 5 catches, Jimmy Graham, 3 catches, Jamal Williams, 3 catches, Lewis with 1, Allison with 1, MVS with 1. So clearly, the way to success in those games was feeding the running backs and spreading the ball around. And that's something that I think Green Bay can still have a lot of success with moving forward, and not specifically spamming just one wide receiver. And I'll say it one more time, I would have spammed Davante Adams as well. You go and watch the tape, and almost every play he's getting open, I would look his way every play if I were the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers with Davante Adams at wide receiver. But there were times where it got predictable, and in big moments, teams were double or even triple covering Adams, and Rodgers would look his way still, and it would make the offense a little bit disjointed at times. And I don't think always the offense flowed the way that it was supposed to, because understandably, Rodgers would look over at Adams and feel like almost on every play feel like he has a favorable matchup. And instead of going with the flow of what was supposed to be called and like setting up plays for later and game planning a game, it was just going to Davante. And again, I would have done that too. I totally get wanting to do that, but I do think that it was at the... I think the flow of the offense struggled at times because of that. And I think there was a little bit more of the Aaron Rodgers offense that came out at, the expense of the Matt LaFleur offense. So I do think there are some positives that can come out of this, even if they don't have that alpha number 1 at wide receiver. I think it's going to force Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers to be at their best and do some of the heavy lifting. And I think both of them are more than up to the task to do that. I don't think it gives the opposing teams, a blueprint into what they're going to do, basically in big situations, target Davante Adams. I think it keeps them off balance a little bit more and makes them have to just know that at any given moment, the Packers can attack with any given player, with any given play, and it's not just going to be, again, force-feeding Davante Adams. And again, I think it makes Aaron Rodgers trust the offense just a little bit more and really lean into the Matt LaFleur offense, which in my opinion has been when this Packers offense has been at its absolute best. There are clearly negatives as well. The big moments where you need a big play, Davante Adams came up with those over and over and over again, and they just don't have that playmaker when you absolutely have to somewhat make a play. And you've got a player like that. Like Green Bay doesn't have that player right now, and that definitely can be a problem. Also, the ESP that Rodgers and Adams had, right? Like that Rodgers could glance over, make a little signal that was almost, completely nondescript, and Adams knew exactly what they meant. Or they were even at the point where they didn't even have to make checks anymore. They just knew what each other were going to do. Cobb and Rodgers probably have a little bit of that. Maybe Lazard can pick up a little bit of that, but nobody had it outside of Jordy the way that Davante did. And, I don't think that they have anyone on the roster that just has that clear connection with Rodgers. And I do think it also gives teams a little bit more emphasis on stopping the run. They don't have to focus so much on Davante Adams. That's going to make it difficult for everyone else to get open, especially if all of a sudden your running game really gets going. Well, they're going to definitely put an extra player in the box because you don't have a Davante Adams to beat them. The other thing I'll say here is that for 3 years, Green Bay with Rodgers, Davante, and this Matt LaFleur offense had the opportunity to go and win a Super Bowl. They've had 3 very good teams, and Green Bay simply couldn't get the job done. this is not a Davante Adams issue. Davante's a brilliant wide receiver, and Green Bay was better with him. But they had 3 seasons where this offense was very good, and Rodgers the MVP of the league with Davante Adams the number 1 wide receiver in football, and they couldn't win enough games. And in those 5 games, the Packers scored 30 points only one time. Their point totals were 28, 20, 26, 32, and 10. They were 2-3 in those games, averaging only 23.2 points per game. And again, 2-3 overall, despite Davante averaging 9 catches, 104 yards, and a touchdown. This is going to force this Packers team to play different. They're going to have to be a defensive-led football team that is going to pound the rock and be a little bit more of a January and February football team. And it remains to be seen if they can, be a good enough offense without Davante Adams, and if Rodgers can still be an MVP quarterback without Davante Adams. We're going to have to wait and see how that goes. There's no easy solution here. But I do think that this team had 3 opportunities to be the team that went out and scored a ton of points with Aaron Rodgers, the MVP, and Davante Adams, the best wide receiver in football. And they didn't. Despite, again, Adams averaging 9 for 104 and a touchdown, they averaged only 23.2 points per game and went 2-3 in those games. Not all on Rodgers, not all on Adams, not all on the offense, but they had those opportunities and they couldn't get the job done. So now Green Bay's going in a different direction, being more of a well-rounded team, hopefully better defense, hopefully better special teams, spreading the ball on offense, and hoping that that brand of football can get Green Bay over the hump and help them win games. So to answer the question, I don't necessarily believe that Green Bay has enough on offense. I still think they're lacking that number 1 overall weapon, but we don't know yet exactly what some of these wide receivers can bring to the table, specifically, Romeo Doubs, Samori Toure, and Christian Watson. And then you also don't know if Amari Rodgers can take a jump. Does Lazard play better with being the guy? Does Sammy Watkins make a jump playing with Aaron Rodgers and playing in this Matt LaFleur offense? There's just enough questions out there that I think they're going to run with the guys that they have and then see if they need to make a move in season after that. So we shall see. I can't wait to see how this offense functions. I'm going to miss Davante Adams more than words can say. Looking forward to seeing how he plays with the Raiders as well. But I am excited to see how this Packers offense plays with this, newfound wide receiver group and probably a new identity on offense. Thanks so much for joining me today. Always appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.